Jensen, this is such an honor. Thank you for being here.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
In honor of your return to Stanford, I decided we'd start talking about the time when you first left. You joined LSI Logic, and that was one of the most exciting companies at the time. You're building a phenomenal reputation with some of the biggest names in tech, and yet you decide to leave to become a founder. What motivated you?
Chris and Curtis. Chris and Curtis, I was an engineer at LSI Logic, and Chris and Curtis were at Sun. And I was working with some of the brightest minds in computer science at the time, of all time, including Andy Bechtolsheim and others, building workstations and graphics workstations and so on and so forth. And Chris and Curtis said one day that they'd like to leave Sun, and they'd like me to go figure out what they're going to go leave for. And I had a great job, but they insisted that I figure out, with them how to build a company. And so we hung out at Denny's whenever they dropped by, and which is, by the way, my alma mater, my first company. My first job before CEO was a dishwasher, and I did that very well. And so, anyways, we got together and we decided, and it was during the microprocessor revolution. This is 1993, and 1992 when we were getting together. The PC revolution was just getting going. You know that Windows 95, obviously, which is the revolutionary version of Windows, didn't even come to the market yet, and Pentium wasn't even announced yet, and this is all right before the PC revolution, and it was pretty clear that the microprocessor was going to be very important, and we thought, why don't we build a company to go solve problems that a normal computer that is powered by general purpose computing can't, and so that became the company's mission, to go build a computer. The type of computers and solve problems that normal computers can't. And to this day, we're focused on that. And if you look at all the problems that in the markets that we opened up as a result, it's things like computational drug design, weather simulation, materials design. These are all things that we're really, really proud of. Robotics, self-driving cars, autonomous software we call artificial intelligence, and then of course, we drove the technology so hard that eventually the computational cost went to approximately zero, and it enabled a whole new way of developing software, where the computer wrote the software itself, artificial intelligence as we know it today. And so that was it. That was the journey.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming.
Well, these applications are on all of our minds today. But back then, the CEO of LSI Logic convinced his biggest investor, Don Valentine, to meet with you. He is obviously the founder of Sequoia.
Yeah.
Now, I can see a lot of founders here edging forward in anticipation. But how did you convince the most sought-after investor in Silicon Valley to invest in a team of first-time founders building a new product for a market that doesn't even exist?
I didn't know how to write a business plan, and so I went to a bookstore, and back then there were bookstores, and in the business book section there was this book, and it was written by somebody I knew, Gordon Bell, and this book, I should go find it again, but it's a very large book, and the book says How to Write a Business Plan. And that was, a highly specific title for a very niche market. And it seems like he wrote it for 14 people, and I was one of them. And so I bought the book. I should have known right away that it was a bad idea, because Gordon is super, super smart. And super smart people have a lot to say. And they want to, and I'm pretty sure Gordon wants to teach me how to write a business plan completely. And so I picked up this book. It's like 450 pages long. Well, I never got through it, not even close. I flipped through it a few pages, and I go, you know what? By the time I'm done reading this thing, I'll be out of business. I'll be out of money. And Lori and I only had about 6 months in the bank. We had already Spencer and Madison and a dog, and so the 5 of us had to live off of whatever money we had in the bank, and so I didn't have much time. And so instead of writing the business plan, I just went to talk to Wilf Corrigan. He called me one day and said, "Hey, you left the company. You didn't even tell me what you were doing. I want you to come back and explain it to me." And so I went back and I explained it to Wilf. And Wilf at the end of it, he said, "I have no idea what you said." And that's one of the worst elevator pitches I've ever heard. And then he picked up the phone and he called Don Valentine. And he called Don and he says, "Don, I'm going to send a kid over. I want you to give him money. He's one of the best employees LSI Logic ever had." And so the thing I learned is you can make up a great interview. You could even have a bad interview, but you can't run away from your past. And so have a good past. Try to have a good past. And in a lot of ways, I was serious when I said I was a good dishwasher. I was probably Denny's best dishwasher. I planned my work. I was organized. I was mise en place. And then I washed the living daylights out of the dishes. And then they promoted me to busboy. I was certain I'm the best busboy Denny's ever had. I never left the station empty-handed. I never came back empty-handed. I was very efficient. And then so anyways, eventually I became, a CEO. I'm still working on being a good CEO. But
you talk about being the best. You needed to be the best among 89 other companies that were funded after you to build the same thing. And then with 6 to 9 months of runway left, you realized that the initial vision was just not going to work. How did you decide what to do next to save the company when the cards were so stacked against you?
Well, we started this company called For Accelerated Computing, and the question is, what is it for? What's the killer app? And that came our first great decision. And this is what Sequoia funded. The first great decision was the first killer app was going to be 3D graphics. And the technology was going to be 3D graphics. And the application was going to be video games. At the time, 3D graphics was impossible to make cheap. It was $1 million image generators from Silicon Graphics. And so it was $1 million, and it's hard to make cheap. And the video game market was $0 billion. So you have this incredible technology that's hard to commoditize and commercialize. And then you have this market that doesn't exist. That intersection was the founding of our company. And I still remember when Don, at the end of my presentation, Don was still kind of, he said, one of the things he said to me, which made a lot of sense back then, it makes a lot of sense today. He says, startups don't invest in startups, or startups don't partner with startups. And his point is that in order for NVIDIA to succeed, we needed another startup to succeed. And that other startup was Electronic Arts. And then on the way out, he reminded me that Electronic Arts' CTO is 14 years old and had to be driven to work by his mom. And he just wanted to remind me that that's who I'm relying on. And then after that, he said, "If you lose my money, I'll kill you." And that was kind of my memories of that first meeting. But nonetheless, we created something. We went on the next several years to go create the market, to create the gaming market for PCs. And it took a long time to do so. We're still doing it today. We realized that not only do you have to create the technology and invent a new way of doing computer graphics so that what was $1 million is now, $300, $400, $500 that fits in a computer. And you have to go create this new market. So we had to create technology, create markets. The idea that a company would create technology, create markets, defines NVIDIA today. Almost everything we do, we create technology, we create markets. That's the reason why people say we have people call it a stack, an ecosystem, words like that. But that's basically it. At the core, for 30 years, what NVIDIA realized we had to do is in order to create the conditions by which somebody could buy our products, we had to go invent this new market. And it's the reason why we were early in autonomous driving. It was the reason why we're early in deep learning. It was the reason why we're early in just about all these things, including computational drug design and discovery. All these different areas, we're trying to create the market while we're creating the technology. And so that's okay. And then we got going, and then Microsoft introduced a standard called Direct3D, and that spawned off hundreds of companies. And we found ourselves a couple of years later competing with just about everybody. And the thing that we invented, the technology we invented 3D graphics with, the consumerized 3D with, turns out to be incompatible with Direct3D. So we started this company, we had this 3D graphics thing, $1 million thing, we're trying to make it consumerized. And so we invented all this technology. And then shortly after, it became incompatible. And so we had to reset the company or go out of business. But we didn't know how to build it the way that Microsoft had defined it. And I remember a meeting at on a weekend, and the conversation was, we now have 89 competitors. I understand that the way we do it is not right, but we don't know how to do it the right way. And thankfully, there was another bookstore, and the bookstore is called Fry's Electronics. I don't know if it's still here. And so I think I drove Madison, my daughter, on a weekend to Fry's, and it was sitting right there, the OpenGL manual, which would define how Silicon Graphics did computer graphics. And so it was right there. It was like $68 a book. And so I had a couple $100. I bought 3 books. I took it back to the office, and I said, guys, I found it, our future. And I handed out, I had 3 versions of it, I handed out. Had a big, nice centerfold. The centerfold is the OpenGL pipeline, which is the computer graphics pipeline. And I handed it to the same geniuses that I founded the company with. And we implemented the OpenGL pipeline like nobody had ever implemented the OpenGL pipeline, and we built something the world never seen. And so a lot of lessons are right there. That moment in time for our company gave us so much confidence. And the reason for that is you can succeed in doing something, inventing a future, even if you were not informed about it at all. And it's kind of my attitude about everything now. When somebody tells me about something and I've never heard of it before, or if I've heard of it, don't understand how it works at all, my first thought is always, how hard can it be? And it's probably just a textbook away. You're probably one archive paper away from figuring this out. And so I spent a lot of time reading archive papers, and it's true. It's true. You can now, of course, you can't learn how somebody else does something and do it exactly the same way and hope to have a different outcome. But you could learn how something can be done and then go back to first principles and ask yourself, given the conditions today, given my motivation, given the instruments, the tools, given how things have changed, how would I redo this? How would I reinvent this whole thing? How would I design it? How would I build a car today? Would I build it incrementally from 1950s and 1900s? How would I build a computer today? How would I write software today? Does it make sense? And so I go back to first principles all the time, even in the company today, and just reset ourselves. Because the world has changed. And the way we wrote software in the past was monolithic, and it's designed for supercomputers, but now it's disaggregated, so on and so forth. And how we think about software today, how we think about computers today, just always cause your company, always cause yourself to go back to first principles, and it creates lots and lots of opportunities.
Yeah, the way you applied this technology turns to be revolutionary. You get all the momentum that you need to IPO, and then some more because you grow your revenue 9 times in the next 4 years. But in the middle of all of this success, you decide to pivot a little bit the focus of innovation happening at NVIDIA based on a phone call you have with this chemistry professor. Can you tell us about that phone call and how you connected the dots from what you heard to where you went?
Remember, at the core, the company was pioneering a new way of doing computing. Computer graphics was the first application. But we always knew that there would be other applications. And so image processing came, particle physics came, fluids came, so on and so forth. All kinds of interesting things that we wanted to do. We made the processor more programmable so that we could express more algorithms, if you will. And then one day we invented programmable shaders, which made all forms of imaging and computer graphics programmable. That was a great breakthrough, so we invented that. On top of that, we invented, we tried to look for ways to express more sophisticated algorithms that could be computed on our processor, which is very different than a CPU. And so we created this thing called CG. I think it was 2003 or so, C for GPUs. It predated CUDA by about 3 years. The same person who wrote the textbook that saved the company, Mark Kilgard, wrote that textbook. And so CG was super cool. We wrote textbooks about it. We started teaching people how to use it. We developed tools and such. And then several researchers discovered it. Many of the researchers here, students here at Stanford, was using it. Many of the engineers that then became engineers at NVIDIA were playing with it. A couple of doctors at Mass General picked it up and used it for CT reconstruction. So I flew out and saw them and said, what are you guys doing with this thing? And they told me about that. And then a computational, a quantum chemist used it to express his algorithms. And so I realized that there's some evidence that people might want to use this, and it gave us incrementally more confidence that we ought to go do this, that this field, this form of computing, could solve problems that normal computers really can't, and reinforced our belief and kept us going.
Every time you heard something new, you really savored that surprise. And that seems to be a theme throughout your leadership at NVIDIA. It feels like you make these bets so far in advance of technology inflections that when the apple finally falls from the tree, you're standing right there in your black leather jacket waiting to catch it. How do you find the conviction?
Always seems like a diving catch. Always does seem like a diving catch. You do things based on core beliefs. We deeply believe that we could create a computer that solves problems normal processing can't do. That there are limits to what a CPU can do. There are limits to what general purpose computing can do. And then there are interesting problems that we can go solve. The question is always, are those interesting problems only, or can they also be interesting markets? Because if they're not interesting markets, it's not sustainable. And NVIDIA went through about a decade where we were investing in this future and the markets didn't exist. There was only one market at the time, it was computer graphics. For 10, 15 years, the markets that fuels NVIDIA today just didn't exist. And so how do you continue with all of the people around you, our company and NVIDIA's management team and all of the amazing engineers that are there creating this future with me, all of your shareholders, your board of directors, all your partners, you're taking everybody with you, and there's no evidence of a market. That is really, really challenging. The fact that the technology can solve problems and the fact that you have research papers that are used, that are made possible because of it are interesting, but you're always looking for that market. But nonetheless, before a market exists, you still need early indicators of future success. We have this phrase in the company there's a phrase called key performance indicators, unfortunately, KPIs are hard to understand. I find KPIs hard to understand. What's a good KPI? A lot of people, when we look for KPIs, you go, gross margins. That's not a KPI. That's a result. You're looking for something that's an early indicators of future positive results, okay? And as early as possible. And the reason for that is because you want that early sign that you're going in the right direction. And so we have this phrase, it's called EIOIFS, early indicators, EIOIFS, early indicators of future success. And it helps people, because I was using it all the time to give the company hope that, hey, look, we solved this problem, we solved that problem, we solved this problem. The markets didn't exist, but there were important problems. And that's what the company's about, to solve these problems. We want to be sustainable, and therefore the markets have to exist at some point. But you want to decouple the result from evidence that you're doing the right thing, okay? And so that's how you kind of solve this problem of investing into something that's very, very far away, and having the conviction to stay on the road, is to find as early as possible the indicators that you're doing the right things. And so start with a core belief. Unless something changes your mind, you continue to believe in it, and look for early indicators of future success.
What are some of those early indicators that have been used by product teams at NVIDIA?
All kinds. I saw a paper. Long before I saw the paper, I met some people that needed my help on this thing called deep learning. At the time, I didn't even know what deep learning was, and they needed us to create a domain-specific language so that all of their algorithms could be expressed easily on our processors. And we created this thing called cuDNN, and it's essentially the SQL. SQL is in storage computing. This is neural network computing, and we created a language, if you will, domain-specific language for that. Kind of like the OpenGL of deep learning. And so they needed us to do that so that they could express their mathematics. And they didn't understand CUDA, but they understood their deep learning. And so we created this thing in the middle for them. And the reason why we did it was because even though there were zero, these researchers had no money. And this is kind of one of the great skills of our company, that you're willing to do something even though the financial returns are completely non-existent, or maybe very, very far out, even if you believed in it. We ask ourselves, is this worthy work to do? Does this advance a field of science somewhere that matters? Notice, this is something that I've been talking about. Since the very beginning of time, we find inspiration not from the size of a market, but from the importance of the work. Because the importance of the work is the early indicators of a future market. And nobody has to do a business case on it. Nobody has to show me a P&L. Nobody has to show me a financial forecast. The only question is this important work? And if we didn't do it, would it happen without us? Now, if we didn't do something and something could happen without us, it gives me tremendous joy, actually. And the reason for that is, could you imagine the world got better, you didn't have to lift a finger? That's the definition of ultimate laziness. And in a lot of ways, you want that habit. And the reason for that is this. You want the company to be lazy about doing things that other people always can do. If somebody else can do it, let them do it. We should go select the things that if we didn't do it, the world would fall apart. You have to convince yourself of that. That if I don't do this, it won't get done. That is, and if that work is hard and that work is impactful and important, then it gives you a sense of purpose. Does that make sense? And so our company has been selecting these projects. Deep learning was just one of them. And the first indicator of the success of that was this, fuzzy cat that Andrew Ng came up with. And then Alex Kershevsky detected cats, not all the time, but successfully enough that it was, this might take us somewhere. And we reasoned about the structure of deep learning, and we're computer scientists, and we understand how things work. And so we convinced ourselves this could change everything. And anyhow, but that's an example.
So these selections that you've made, they've paid huge dividends, both literally and figuratively. But you've had to steer the company through some very challenging times, like when it lost 80% of its market cap amid the financial crisis because Wall Street didn't believe in your bet on ML. In times like these, how do you steer the company and keep the employees motivated at the task at hand?
My reaction during that time is the same reaction I had about this week. Earlier today, you asked me about this week. My pulse was exactly the same. This week is no different than last week or the week before that. And so the opposite of that, when you drop 80%, don't get me wrong. When your share price drops 80%, it's a little embarrassing, okay? And you just want to wear a T-shirt that says "wasn't my fault." But even more than that, you just don't want to. You don't want to get out of your bed. You don't want to leave the house. All of that is true. All of that is true. But then you go back to just doing your job. I woke up at the same time, prioritized my day in the same way. I go back to what do I believe? You got to gut check, always gut check back to the core. What do you believe? What are the most important things? And just check them off. Sometimes it's helpful to, family loves me. Okay, check. Double check. Right? And so you just got to check it off, and you go back to your core, and then go back to work. And then every conversations go back to the core. Keep the company focused back on the core. Do you believe in it? Did something change? The stock price changed, but did something else change? Did physics change? Did gravity change? Did all of the things that we assumed, that we believed, that led to our decision, did any of those things change? Because if those things change, you got to change everything. But if none of those things change, you change nothing. Keep on going. Yeah. That's how you do it.
In speaking with your employees, they say that
try to avoid the public.
In speaking with your employees, they've said that your leadership
including the employees. I'm just kidding. No, leaders have to be seen. Unfortunately, that's the hard part. I was an electrical engineering student, and I was quite young when I went to school. When I went to college, I was still 16 years old, and so I was young when I did everything, and so I was a bit of an introvert. I'm kind of I'm shy. I don't enjoy public speaking. I'm delighted to be here. I'm not suggesting, but it's not something that I do naturally, and so when things are challenging, it's not easy to be in front of precisely the people that you care most about, And the reason for that is because, could you imagine a company meeting our stock price just dropped by 80%, and the most important thing I have to do as the CEO is this, to come and face you, explain it. And partly, you're not sure why, partly, you're not sure how long, how bad, you just don't know these things, but you still gotta explain it. Face all these people, and you know what they're thinking. Some of them are probably thinking we're doomed. Some people are probably thinking you're an idiot, and some people are probably thinking something else. And so there are a lot of things that people are thinking, and you know that they're thinking those things, but you still have to get in front of them and deal, do the hard work.
They may be thinking of those things, but yet not a single person of your leadership team left during times like this. And in